conversation about digital payments for a cashless economy. And if you were looking at my piece of paper, I actually wrote the words cashless society, crossed out society, and put what was on the agenda. But I really do think we're talking about the humans who are impacted by the digital innovations that create the pathways for the movement of cash. So perhaps one day they'll become interchangeable. My name is Viola Llewellyn, and I am the founder and co-founder and president of Ovamba Solutions, Inc., which is a trade tech innovator. I think we exist because payments exist and vice versa. After all, we're all here building an ecosystem. But today is not about me. It's about the brilliant colleagues, new and familiar. Hi, Chris. I'm so glad you could step in. Who are here to discuss digital payments for a cashless economy. And this is the format that we're going to go through. It's going to be a conversation. This is not the talking head show. But really, just want you to have in mind that in the beginning of the year, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement has literally launched. It's supposed to be live. I don't know how live that really is, but there definitely are the burgeonings of what will be a wonderful trading bloc that is supposed to make Africa a part of the globalized economy in a way that has not been seen in quite a long time. And I know that everybody on the panel here is extremely excited about this. But trade and business is changing rapidly, just as it is here in the Egyptian market and with the change in the financial regulations that we've been hearing about today. So therefore, all sectors are up for grabs, they're all up for change, and all of it will be driving growth because payments and the evolution of cash is what we're here to talk about. So I'm going to introduce my colleagues here. They're just going to give you a little brief introduction. If you want to learn more about them, you really ought to open your laptop and go read more. But the best of what you'll learn about them will be from this conversation. And to my left is Sahar. And she is the founder of TPAY. And she has worked long and hard for at least a decade to be at the table and to be an important part of the ecosystem of payments. And I'll allow her to tell a little bit about her story. And I'm just really glad that you're here.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and super excited to be here, super excited to be on this panel, super excited that we survived all of these years and we are in a very exciting point of the whole global ecosystem, but definitely Africa.
Absolutely. And we also have Ahmed, who I had a lovely conversation with yesterday. And with Ahmed, this is something that you don't often get to hear about, so it's such a privilege to have you here. But basically, as the founder of MoneyFellows, in my mind, he's making an older, traditional form of finance absolutely hip once again. So good to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks. Very happy to be with you guys today.
And Chris, who's the savior of the day, he's not wearing a big S on his chest, but he was very kind at the last minute to step in, as unfortunately Mohamed, who's the country manager for Mastercard, was not able to make it. But in the time that I got to speak with Chris, I am excited at what he and his team have been able to build in terms of digital solutions for settlements, moving capital. And I won't take his thunder, I'll allow him to explain his business to the rest of the audience.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Chris. Happy to be here. So I run Yellow Card, which is the largest crypto exchange on the continent right now. We operate in 12 countries and make it extremely easy for anybody to be able to access the crypto ecosystem, right? So cash, mobile money, bank transfer, all that fun stuff. Get into Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDT, get out of it, get back into the local economy.
I don't think this panel would have been complete without you, Chris, so thank you for being here at short notice. So we're going to dive in, and as I said, this is a conversation. So.
All right.
Well, I do have a question for you, Sahar. Hold on a second here. Well, I'm really very interested to know, in light of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, you saw everything up until that point and beyond. What does this mean in terms of the strategic evolution of the solutions that you've been creating?
Right. Thank you very much for the very important question, but that sets the stage to understand a little bit why am I excited to be here. And TPAY started like almost 8 years ago, and this was really early days in the whole of the African ecosystem, including Egypt. in terms of how we see the future, and in terms of how we were in a completely different world in terms of readiness, in terms of technology, regulatory environment, and of course the funding and the entrepreneurial ecosystem was a completely different. I'm so excited that now 8 years down the road, and we've seen a huge evolution. And why we existed was so simple, is that I was just saying at the beginning that I was the product of being in the working, of the corporates that have been there for years and years and years. And what I saw is that how we can really step out of the flow of being into the corporate world and then make something out of the abilities or in assets that those corporate world happens to have. Literally, and primarily I'm talking about the telco sector. And how I saw it back then, I dared to dream that, okay, we're here in the years of 2011 and 2012, and we're just challenging that why we're having a 2%, 3% financial inclusion after all of this evolution of the world, the tech and the financial sector and banks and etc. And just the gap was so huge for me to really understand how we are going to leap this gap and really make it happen in terms of inclusion. But like inclusion is about everything. It's about this consumer, it's about us, me and you, who have the luxury to be included part of the digital economy. The world was moving into software as a service, moving into platform economy, moving into online, more digital and digital and digital. And we're just thinking about how we can contribute to click this button, just to use the service, to have access to the service, and then to be able to build our, dreams and even small, medium enterprises and small projects and startups, without having access to this ecosystem. We couldn't,
Yeah.
And the only way I saw it is that there is only one way, and maybe I should try to do it, is that I go to the most, important player in the world.
Well, let me just stop you there.
Yeah.
When you say the most important player,
in terms of his capability to solve the problem. They were not solving the problem. So I wanted to go to them and tell them, why you're not solving the problem? The operators, yes, operators, MNOs. And they were the closest of readiness. They were not ready. They were the closest in terms of readiness in terms of fixing the basics. So what we've done of TPAY is that we built the only payment platform, digital enabler for all of the use cases of the digital economy, and we can speak about them all and all again, that does micropayment and that does achieve, in reality, achieve the reach of the pockets of the consumers, identity of the consumer sitting across the Middle East and Africa. So with this network, now in 2021, we have this one single API, this one asset.
So hold on, let me interrupt you because I promised this was not going to be the Talking Head show.
Yeah.
But I love the detail, but I want you to drill into something in particular that you're telling us about here in terms of what you saw and where we are. Has your customer changed?
I had to work with a different side of the story, which is the mobile network operators. And this was a lot of work to do in order to change a mentality, ecosystem, also to really build a model, an economical model that works, unit economics that works, and that scaled across the years, and that could be appealing and really of real demand to the other side. We exist because of the other side, which is the consumer, and the consumer is being served by the service providers, and the service providers were underserved by the ecosystem of the payment.
I get it now.
This is where we had to fill the gap. And as we speak now, I can say 8 years down the road, we've managed to partner with everybody in this ecosystem, and we've managed to create something that was not there, was very far-fetched, which is a micropayment platform that sits on the ecosystem of the operators, not on top of the banks. And currently, we, of course, with the collaboration happening between everywhere in the banks, with the regulatory environment that is advanced, now banks are coming to our way and becoming more and more digital, becoming API enabled, become digital enabled. So actually, as we speak now, banks are our partners, financial institutions are our partners. The guys here, in all of their use cases, they could use some of our...
Let me just have you hold that thought. Please hold that thought. I want to relate that to what you're doing. Because again, everybody here is very customer-centric, and we're really talking about how she's created an evolution around the idea of cashless payments that has been affected by the choices that her business has made with their potential partners. Now, when you and I were talking, I was absolutely psyched, because I do remember that Ovamba first tried to create a diaspora-based product that would go to the Tontines, the Njangis, the Susus, and all of this lot. How is it like for you and your customers when I have never been able to imagine that model in a cashless format? What's that really like?
So I think thankful to, the companies like TPAY and the other payment enablers and aggregators and facilitators. They always build the right infrastructure for us to really offer the best possible user experience to our consumer. When we look at consumer from a use case perspective, payments is one aspect of it. So we try to ease up the whole process, and like you've said, cash-based transactions is always a limitation to growth. It's a very heavy operation, and there are a lot of fraud cases that could happen, crime. There's reconciliation issues. So it's very, very difficult to definitely scale with a cash-based system. Unfortunately, this was the case initially. The people who are always used to do roskas or gamiyas have always been relying on cash.
Yes.
And we wanted to change that. So we wanted to actually use those platforms to help enable the cashless payments. And initially it was a bigger distribution of our consumers relying on cash. You start playing around with loyalty, pointing, starting to incentivize people to switch into a more digital payment process, which took some time, but I think we've succeeded in that. I think over 90% of our transactions today is happening digitally. Even the cash transactions happen through the likes of Fawri, for example. People with cash, they actually can approach any of the closest POS machines across the country, which is over like 200,000 POS machines.
And who regulates your model?
Sorry?
Who regulates your model? Who regulates your model? Is it the FRA or is it?
Yeah, so this has been like a long journey. Initially, it was an unregulated model. And then we started closely working with both regulators. It was an issue initially to identify which regulators to regulate this type of model, and when we finally reached the conclusion that the Central Bank of Egypt is to regulate this, especially after the latest Fintech law, which has been issued, to start looking into the sandbox, so the regulatory sandbox. We've been admitted to that, and I think this was the initial step towards regulating roskas generally.
Perfect. Chris, totally in awe of what you've done. And from the settlement standpoint, I think you and I were having a quick conversation. Actually, I think I was speaking with Chad about the experience we had in Cameroon, going into a bank and trying to find out where is the trusts department, how can we get them to help us with contract-driven activities. How has it been for you speaking to regulators and explaining your business product?
Yeah, I think whenever you're talking about any sort of innovative technology, right, which crypto certainly falls into, it becomes extremely important to loop in the regulators early, right? I think that with certain business models you can run unregulated, right? With others, it's good to involve the regulators, start those conversations, and especially for innovative products, right? It's not just good for you and for the company. It's good for the entire ecosystem, right? If you're going to be doing an innovative product in a country that hasn't seen it before, then part of your responsibility is to help formalize that industry for the next people that want to do it, right? I mean, there's a little bit of irony in saying that what we're doing has been difficult, obviously, doing it across the continent. But my hope and part of our goal is that long after we're gone, whoever wants to do it next is going to have a much easier time because of some of the groundwork that we're trying to lay.
You
right?
just backed into my next question. Can you dig a little bit deeper into that? And I want all of you to talk about this because we're all ecosystem builders. And when we first started, we were definitely an anomaly for a little while. And then it began to occur to us that, especially as African innovators, we have the amazing opportunity to build a legacy. And I know that Africa leapfrogs, but tell us a little bit more about how do you balance building a sustainable, profitable business that is a market leader, whilst also making it almost soft ground for the second player so that the competition is healthy and the customer is first?
Yeah, well, I mean, for us, right, it's about doing that, right? It's about creating that soft ground, right, and making it a little bit easier for the next person. At the same time, we try to move very fast, and what I always tell, especially our compliance team that's working with these central banks, is we want to make sure that the next person to do this is going to have a much easier time. But if they do it now while we're still doing it, then we're going to kick their ass.
Totally. So, Ahmed, as you can see, many of us have had to be quasi-lobbyists, almost as if we are hiding in plain sight and waiting to be forgiven if we haven't taken permission. Again, how do you explain, not just to your customers to give them that sense of trust and reliability, but also to speak to the regulator, the policymakers, that they can entrust that the thing they can't see, you know more about? What's that like?
To be honest, it was quite, challenging at the beginning to really convince them that we know much about what we're doing, especially once, without really solid track record. And I think they started, to be honest, taking us more seriously towards, once we started, growing and scaling to a certain extent. And this might have been a coincidence that also the Fintech laws has been released and all those things. So I think. We knocked their doors early on. We had all our plans, told to them. We thought together what are the sort of controls that we need to think of in order to make them comfortable, with such a model. And we had to tweak a lot of things as we actually launched and pivoted and changed the product. So I think once you have a solid operational cycle, compliance cycle, we had to actually self-regulate ourselves. To offer the best possible customer experience, to protect the customer, because that's what the regulators are looking for. So we had to do it ourselves, and then it actually made sense to them what we've built, what we've tried to how we try to regulate ourselves actually can be adopted and become more formalized. So this has so it's been a long journey, but I think it's actually very fruitful now.
Thank you. Sahar, in your portfolio, your customer portfolio, who do you feel gets the most economic bang for buck using your services? And what does growth mean to them from using TPAY?
Yeah. So first, we built from the beginning, our vision was to enable those partners to have access. Yeah. So the most important success KPI for our merchants or our partners or our digital partners using our ecosystem is to be able to first exist, penetrate. Most of the challenges of the biggest players, even the global big giants, is that there are so many barriers, and this region is just a black box. And so our first target was to offer a penetration that is smooth and, of course, empowered by the technology so that they can play with it. They have the comfort of using and playing and penetrating, and without really investing hard at the beginning. So removing the barriers of penetration, just to say. Second is to avail for them, a technology that allows them to growth is a very difficult, target for digital platforms, international, local, regionals, down to the startups. We have so many startups at the beginning, like e-learning platforms, gaming, venture, publishers, whatever, they could not exist and survive in terms of their business model without a monetization, revenue generation machine. So our second KPI is how to create for all of this digital startup ecosystem, digital platforms of the world, a revenue model.
And the original question was about the customers in your portfolio. I'm desperate to know about the humans.
We're B2B. Actually, our customers are the merchants. So the merchants, to survive, they had to, we had to solve for them 2 KPIs. Being the merchant to be able to penetrate the countries we exist in, and then a merchant being able to monetize from the country, so for them that they can scale. So we enable our customers to be able to empower their consumers. We're not there to really think about how they acquire or how they propose or what is the product or what is the pricing, but we're here to enable, the access to the economy of those regions. And so these were the most important KPIs since day one, enabled by the technology for the digital ecosystem at scale. And at scale is very important because we build for scalability, we build to be regulated, we build to be cross-border, we build to be multi-country, and we build for the guys to use our platforms, not only the startups. So for those guys to be able to penetrate and grow in Middle East and North African region was our only goal for the very first 4 years. Currently, we have even much more harsher goals related to them penetrating the population with a double-digit numbers, and this is a very ambitious type of target. But we're, I have to say, our first incumbents or partners or customers who penetrated with us for 4 years, currently they have 16% of the population of our region, and this is a huge milestone for us and for our partners.
And I don't think we can have this conversation, I'm throwing this out to everybody, without really talking about data. Any of you want to take that from any angle whatsoever? We're seeing a preponderance, and one of my concerns, especially when we talk about digital payments, cashless societies, and data, how do we avoid creating a new form of poverty and exclusion while trying to drive financial inclusion with these very sophisticated products, some which have been beautifully simplified? But does this ever kind of creep into your mindset around your own strategic management of the businesses that you're building? And anybody can answer this.
Yeah. When you think about financial inclusion, right? I think in general, financial inclusion tends to be somewhat of a vanity metric, right? I think that people talk about financial inclusion as if it is the big sort of problem that needs to be solved, right? For most countries, I can only speak within the context of Africa, but for most countries, in my experience, people do not have bank accounts because they can't get them. They don't have bank accounts because they don't have any money, right? And so, when we talk about financial inclusion, it goes a step further than just making sure that somebody has access to a financial product, right? I mean, there's
democracy of choice.
Yeah, there's a whole nother layer of basic financial literacy, education, right? I mean, making sure that people have access to opportunities to be able to earn income, to have something to put in these accounts in the first place, right? And so I don't think that the products that are coming out today in any way create a different type of exclusion, right? I think that they largely are making it easier for people to be able to do things and have places to put their money and all of that. I think that just looking at financial inclusion holistically, I think that in general we need to take a step back and talk about just basic financial literacy, right? Talk about education, talk about opportunities, job growth, right? Because you can give somebody a bank account, but if they don't have any money, then it doesn't do them any good, right? It's not going to make them. It's not, a bank account's not going to feed you, right? People use cash because that's all the money they have, and so why would I put it in a bank and pay fees, right? And so, yeah, I think it you know, financial inclusion, it actually requires taking a step back and talking about that education piece and job growth, right? How do we get more investment here? How do we make sure that people have opportunities? And then how do we make sure that they understand, you know, just basic concepts around money, right?
I couldn't agree with you more. I feel the same way. What about yourself, Ahmed?
So a big portion of our customers are actually, we're targeting people who are unbanked. I mean, so I have a slight, a lot of those people do have money. They might not have bank accounts, maybe because they can't find the exact use case they're looking for, the right incentives, the right pricing, the right experience. And that's, you know, part of what we think, part of what we are actually trying to do is really support this financial inclusion agenda and really try to onboard those people who are doing exactly, Rosca's digital jam'iyas or offline jam'iyas and turn them into a digital format. And I think in terms of data, I think it's one of the reasons also why financial inclusion in a country like Egypt is also very high is the lack of data. So I think we're also very keen on tracking the right data so that eventually we know exactly, once we onboard those type of segments, we know exactly what to serve them next and how to serve them next. And eventually it could be a very precious set of data that we analyzed and tracked and that maybe they can access further financial services apart from MoneyFellows as well. So yeah, so data is very important, and I think the use cases generally is also very important for financial inclusion.
And another question to throw out, especially unless you want to address that as well, Sahar.
I just want to say that cash is not going to disappear because it is whether you're
poor
or not, cash is there. But it's not about cashless. It's not about, not having cash. It's about how fast you can really move this cash into the ecosystem to make things happen for those users.
The velocity of capital.
Business, whether it's for business, and the keyword is digitization. It's just like about how I want to have access for this use case now, and I want to be able to really achieve this use case now without going through all of the pain first of having the access in the very first place, but also moving it on time, but also transacting it in the right place. So this is part of what we're trying to solve. It's just like all of these are real problems, but I think, and this is why I'm against the let's say unbanked terminology, because it's not anymore, and back to Chris, it's not about the ecosystem that you use or where you want to save or how much you have even in the first place. It's about how you are allocating what you have in real time with the digital lifestyle we are living.
It's interesting you should say that, because yesterday Ahmed was explaining to me in a quick message back and forth about transitioning the informal to the formal sector so that they could be a part of leveraging the cashless and digital society. How far does that actually go towards real wealth creation, do you think? And is it necessary to transition?
So I think wealth creation is a big part of it is really managing your cash. So I think it's extremely difficult to really manage cash non-digitally. I think, at some point you need to put it somewhere, track it in a different way, apart from just keeping it aside
so not under your mattress.
in a locker. Sorry?
Not under your mattress.
Yeah,
Not
exactly. Not on
100
the, exactly. So I think that's on an individual level. I think even creating wealth on a corporate level, it's also again very hard to scale with cash. So I mean, a company can grow to a certain stage, but not beyond that if it's completely relying on cash. So this also creates, I think, wealth for companies, and so cashless is very, very important. And I think we're getting much closer. At least here in Egypt, it's getting much better with the likes of TPAY and the other payment providers, with also the awareness other companies are, building with the consumer him or herself, with Corona, so there's so many things happening that really encourages people to start using, digital payment solutions rather than cash.
So we're going to go into a quick lightning round about what the future looks like, starting with you, Chris, specifically speaking. Do you think we'll reach a point where, let's say, with Yellow Card, we'll be able to do things like equity investments on a digital basis with your product?
That sounds cool.
I thought so. I thought of it. What do you think, though?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, speaking for us personally, right? I think that we've built a unique platform, right? And I think that there's a lot of things that we can potentially build on top of that, right? And so I mean, for us, we have a lot of demand on both sides, right? Of the different markets that we operate in, and so certainly layering things like equities and
tokens.
Other financial instruments on top of what we do certainly sounds interesting, right? That being said, I'm a big fan of crypto, and we're going to make sure that people have access to that first and foremost.
That's brilliant. And Sahar, for the future, do you think that TPAY would be involved in, let's say, something like local governments being able to use a digital payments platform for things like tax assessments, payments, and transfer of value in that way?
Very good question. If you asked me this question 4 years ago or 3 years ago, the answer would be definitely no way. I cannot see the way forward. However, lucky us, I mean, we're here, and yes, I can answer that with all of the, let's say, education, efforts of all of the ecosystem. Definitely government is on top of them, central banks, regulators, fintech players all around, because more specialization, more digitalization, technology booming, consumer making a decision that what they want, they are very clear about what they want and how they want it. So what is obvious now is that it's just like, there is no way, let's make it this way, there is no way that we can really fix this equation of what the consumers expect us to do in terms of really using real life services sectors, government scale, digitizing the let's say, our life, whether it is private sector or public sector kind of solutions, without all of us collaborating to make it happen in a single project. So all of it has to be right at the same time, and it sounds or it seems like COVID had made it like easier for us to realize that collaboration is the way. Mm-hmm. But definitely it accelerated all of the efforts across all of the challenges I've been
in our last 45 seconds, I'm so sorry, though I do want to hear more about that. And for MoneyFellows, and we didn't even talk about NFTs and what does that mean for closed social groups that are sharing risk and moving money around between each other. What sort of instruments do you think will come down the pike to be able to keep these closed groups financially reliant on each other or build wealth together?
So I think when it comes to crypto at some point, I think when we think of it, it has to be, I mean, we're quite far away, at least here in Egypt. We're trying to turn just, cash to cashless via the normal cards and, plastic cards. And so I think it might be just a further step. I think it could be very beneficial once we start really expanding across different borders and try to connect those closed groups across different countries, different currencies, and unify them with one currency at some point. So I think this is where the use case might come in place and make a lot more sense than today for us.
I want to thank my panelists for being so gracious. It was only a quick 50 minutes, and as you can imagine, these topics are inexhaustible. It's been a brilliant conference so far. They are all available. Please look for them on LinkedIn. They've got business cards, some of them do. I know that some of them allow you to just take a little quick look at the QR code, but either way, it's been a pleasure to chat with all of you. Thank you for being part of this, and let's give our panelists a hand.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so more good news I'm bringing you at the end of this long and very fruitful day. And I invite everyone to take their seat. Hi, Karima, Nawarti. Her name is Karima too. So we have our last flash pitch. It's going to be the last pitch for the day. We have Zeal app coming to pitch, and we have the co-founder and CEO, Omar Abeid, here. Hi, Omar.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Omar Abeid, the CEO and founder of Zeal. Pleasure to be here with you and to be in the middle of people that are impact-driven. We're a mobile payment and loyalty app. We work with the retail, F&B, and entertainment sectors. What we do is, what we found out is that the retail and food and beverage outlets want to retain their customers, but they're not willing to pay a lot to retain their customers. So what do? We embedded payment loyalty programs within our payment method. You walk into a store with your QR code on your phone, you place it on a scanner, you pay, and you get your loyalty points at the same time. Now we gather data analytics for our merchants. We start telling them X client or X customer hasn't been to your place in X weeks or X days, send them a push notification. We use a lot of data science to retain the customers. And then we started introducing new features to the product, to the payment and loyalty experience, such as buying a cup of coffee and sending it to someone in the form of a QR code, which fits in perfectly to our user experience. We've just raised our seed round. We're very excited to be raising a pre-series round as well. We're right outside here. We've got a booth here, inviting you to check it out. Like I said, it's a $123 billion market. I was very happy to find that we were featured on the World Bank's website on an article that we're driving impact and fintech within Egypt. We were accelerated in London, in Set Squared. There's definitely a lot going on in the market. Again, like I said, I invite you to check us out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Omar.